again to the Acid Trash Jamboree, and to yet another quick look at some of the cassettes that I've still got kicking about in the collection, many of which were released during the late 2000s and early 2010s heyday of obscure ambient, drone, psychedelic, and experimental music. So we kick off with a tape entitled Lower Decks by Sean McCann, yet another person that made quite a name for himself during this period. As far as I'm aware, he's more of a modern classical composer these days, but during his younger years, he was cranking out the drone jams left, right and centre. And yeah, whilst this tape emerged in 2010, these particular tracks were recorded a few years prior, between 2005 and 2006, when McCann was still a teenager. In all honesty, I don't think I've listened to this in close to a decade. So as I've said about other tapes that I've dug out lately, it's basically like listening to a new album. Not that the music is all that fresh or original. Yeah, to my ears, on the A-side at least, McCann was evidently still searching for his sound. So if you're familiar with the Cranky label at all, you'll hear him approximating the fat, sustained guitar tones of Growing, then the spacey drift of Stars of the Lid or Windy and Carl, the side wrapping up with the pleasant piano ambience of Birthday Live Loop, which carries a whiff of the mellower stuff coming from Germany in the 1970s. The flip side is a touch more satisfying, the epic, blissed-out melodic noisescape Kellogg, leading into the mellow, reflective May 29th Part 2, which combines calming synth float with slightly warped field recordings captured on a dictaphone. So these early archival efforts aren't bad by any means, but there was much better to come from McCann just a couple of years down the road. One example being this tape, New Molluska, a split album with Black Eagle Child, released by McCann's Rollover Rover label in 2009. Both artists present us with side-long suites of over 30 minutes apiece, so you're definitely getting your money's worth here. McCann's superb side, commencing with a dizzying barrage of garbled, modified voices and psychedelic synth tones, some pleasant, some playful, others downright strange and sinister. Eventually, he pulls out his violin, adding some droning stability to the previously restless, ever-shifting electronic mass, the synths then dropping out for the most part, as the violin playing starts to get more agitated and wild. McCann then floats some luminescent 12-string acoustic guitar into the mix, both bowed and strummed, the piece moving in a welcome acid folktronica direction, a bit like Richard Young's masterpiece, Airs of the Ear, things steadily getting more ambient as the minutes tick by. Then, before we know it, we're in full-on cosmic new age territory, populated by gorgeously glacial synth textures and crystalline chimes, McCann kindly allowing us to float around here for the remainder of the side. Now, I was on about Michael Jantz and Black Eagle Child in the last cassette review video, namely the collaboration he did with Good Willies. And yeah, for the most part, his suite here is altogether more focused than that rather eclectic affair, opening in a distinctly pastoral manner with melodious finger-picking on a nylon string guitar, backed by birdsong and bits of electronic ambience. He's certainly no fingerstyle virtuoso, with multiple mistakes and flubbed notes left in the mix, though the overall effect is nice enough, bringing to mind the lighter moments of Six Organs of Admittance, or the less frenetic pieces by Peter Walker. Following a brief minor key interlude, also played on nylon string guitar, Jantz introduces a more aggressive, distorted drone section, then a stretch of pretty steel string folksiness, the side wrapping up with a spot of meandering Harold Budd-style piano ambience, and another noisy drone out for good measure. So yeah, maybe a touch more eclectic than I first intimated. Whatever the case, it's all pretty cool, if a bit outclassed by McCann's utterly masterful assemblage. Next, a very quick word about a different split tape, which pairs up Astronaut, a project of Andy Plovnik, and Oneohtrix Point Never mastermind Daniel Lopatin, with Bill Kouligas's family battle snake. Both acts offer up roughly 15 minutes of unbroken synthesizer action, with Astronaut's piece firmly on the cosmic side of things, very much in thrall to the great electronic masters of the 70s, most notably the classic early solo LPs by Tangerine Dream leader Edgar Froese. Yeah, you know the drill. Warm, glowing space drones float and meander endlessly, as phased squiggles and flutterings slowly drift into focus, before disappearing back into the void. On the flip, Family Battle Snake's own Synthfest starts off with quiet spaceship loops, before Kouligas piles on the scary long-tone drones and things get decidedly sinister. The piece then steadily builds in volume, until it morphs into something altogether more blissful, finally shaking off the nagging atonal layers in its closing stages. Now, whilst my copy still plays all the way through, which isn't something I can always say about tapes released by this label, Digitalis, unfortunately, it seems like I got a bad dub, as both sides are plagued by wowing and pitch fluctuation, lending the music a nauseating microtonal quality. That said, when I checked out the rip here on YouTube, that doesn't sound much better either, so I'm guessing the whole batch was duff to begin with. In all honesty though, there's nothing overly exciting here. Of course, if you're a Lopatin completist or just a synth nerd in general, then it's worth a couple of listens. Otherwise, there are plenty of other places to get your Kosmische kicks. Next up, here's a tape by Ross Gentry's Villages alias, released by Hooker Vision and entitled Grey East. And yeah, whilst this isn't as unremittingly dour and downcast as you might expect, going off the name, it's still a rather serious and straight-faced affair. As with so many artists from this scene, loops and drones are the order of the day here. Gentry starting out building up dense webs of melancholic ambience via bowed electric guitar figures, rich synth frequencies, and buried field recordings, only to strip things right back for the nightmarish deathscape cemetery lights, and its altogether more hopeful next-door neighbour, Optibismal. Over on the other side, we find a mixture of the same kind of vibes. All the Bells Stopped is another slow-moving dronathon, whilst Front Street hinges around a reflective, clean-toned, post-rock guitar arpeggio, backed by watery synth bloops and bowed cymbals. Tape Closer the Cryptids is the quietest and sparsest piece of them all, with soft, shimmering drones surrounding a barely audible synth pulse, which still manages to convey a sense of dread in spite of its low volume. We move on to another tape from the Hooker Vision stable, Tonal Murmurs, Forest Landscape by Derek Rogers. As with pretty much all the tapes I've covered lately, the last time I played this was probably close to 10 years ago, so as I keep saying, for this review, I may as well have been hearing it for the first time, as my recollection of it is non-existent. And yeah, this is a weird little release for sure. The Tonal Murmurs side, kicking off with gross, low synth croaks, which echo off into nothingness as a headache-inducing drone cluster coalesces in the foreground. After a few minutes of this, Rogers switches things up drastically, mucking about with a succession of plunderphonic loops derived from old jazz and classical records, before changing course again, introducing an extended stretch of shimmering melodic guitar drone. This cuts out abruptly, our man rounding the side out with 2 sections of muffled motor noise, sounding uncannily like an army of pissed-off lawnmowers doing their thing outside your house at 7 on a Sunday morning, in the middle of which he mashes down the keys on a heavily fuzzed-out organ. Forest Landscape picks up where the A-side left off, with more of that muffled rumbling, quickly moving into a much fresher sonic space with sustained organ figures that touch on the same endless horizon gorgeousness as Beautiful Spec Triumph by Birchville Cat Motel, before he flips on the fuzz again and things get even more yearning. The clean-toned drones that follow are much less emotionally charged, this section sounding more like a nod to old-school classical minimalism, after which it's back to the Birchvillisms, Rogers obliterating his melody with glitches and hissing white noise. The tape then concludes as it began, with more of that echoed synth croak. So yeah, as I say, this is a weird tape, moving through myriad unconnected places and spaces over its 60-minute runtime. Yeah, for me at least, the A-side in particular plays out more like a showreel rather than a satisfying, homogeneous work. I do own a smattering of other tapes featuring Derek Rogers, so hopefully when I re-listen to those it'll help this one to come into focus a bit more. Until then, this is still pretty good. It's just a bit too all over the place for me to really grasp what he was going for. As we near the end of this cassette roundup, I'll say a few words about the self-titled 2009 effort by Hanging Thief, a one-off collaboration between Digitalis bosses and real-life married couple Brad and Eden Hemming Rose, and the 2 fellas from Barn Owl, Evan Caminiti and John Porras. And yeah, as with a bunch of the other tapes I've discussed today, what we have here are 2 sprawling side-long jams, heavy on the drone and more than likely completely improvised. The A-side piece, Glowing Sky Void, fully lives up to its name, presenting us with a glorious stretch of brooding, free-floating nirvana, in which massed electric guitars and hyper-distorted wordless vocals billow like storm clouds, the performers seemingly trying their hardest to commune with the ancient sky gods. Then on side B's Horizon Rivers, it's synthesizers that dominate the sound picture, burbling, bubbling, screaming and screeching over further molten layers of axe loopage. Things occasionally smoothing out and quietening down, only for the atonal freakery to lurch forwards again when you least expect it. In truth, though, both these pieces are so hyper-detailed that me attempting to sum them up in a few neat sound bites is a pretty pointless exercise. Basically, if you've ever wanted to hear a mixture of good, old-fashioned 70s-style cosmic freakery and the deep, intense drone doom stylings that were all the rage throughout the 2000s, then you'll no doubt get something out of this. So that rounds up another episode. If you're new around these parts and you enjoyed this video, please check out the Cassette Curiosities playlist for all the other parts of this mini-series. There's plenty more cool stuff on the way. Until then, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again soon on the Acid Trash Jamboree.